Sport had always just been sport. The game had just been the game. The look of sport had always just been the look of sport. Until it wasn't anymore. There was a moment on the timeline of modern sport when everything changed. A few talented and passionate designers were brought together with one mission: to change the look, feel, and performance of sport forever. What started as a ripple in the early 1990s has served as the catalyst for the international revolution in sports branding, uniform design, and performance innovation that continues to accelerate today. This is the origin story of Nike Team Sports, as told by the designers, creators, and innovators who made it happen. This is The Designesty.
Welcome to episode 7 of The Designesty. I'm your host, Ken Black. Today's episode is a little bit different. We've got Keith Houlemard here to talk about a project that is near and dear to my heart. It's the first kind of signature project in my career, which is the 1997 redesign of the Denver Broncos identity and uniforms from head to toe. It's the first time Nike had ever done that for a professional franchise, for a professional team. I was fortunate to be the one to lead it. There were a lot of amazing designers on that project, but it was the one that really catapulted my career to what came next, and is something that I'm extremely proud of and was pumped to work on. And I'm excited to share it with you. Today, you will hear the one true, authentic, behind-the-scenes story. No matter what you've heard before, today you will hear the real deal. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Awesome. Welcome back, Hooli. It's great to have you, man. I love these conversations with you, and this one's going to be interesting. I'm flipping it your way.
Yeah, this will be fun. I love hearing from you on this part of it, because you and I had so much background both in basketball, Jordan, and of course in our time with the Olympics, which we haven't really delved into nearly as deep yet. But this one, want to talk to you a little bit about not only about football, but about kind of the creative process and how we got there. And we talked before about some of the identity work we did almost ad hoc on these basketball teams and so on, like Georgetown and Syracuse. But when we entered into the NFL, like this was a whole new time for Nike. So what's your recollection? What happened? How did Nike actually get into the NFL? Because we didn't really like them at first, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we liked the NFL more than they liked us, is just what I got. From what I recall, some of the conversations, and I know Devon Burt had done some illustrations of, I think, Broncos and Steelers uniforms that they were floating with the NFL, trying to get conversations going. But the way in was really Phil Knight and Jerry Jones on the sideline of the Cowboys stadium on a Monday Night Football. Phil was wearing a Cowboys hat and Jerry was wearing a swoosh cap. And we had actually made a set of non-branded uniforms, because there was a clause in the relationship or the NFL properties deal that said that teams you have to wear whatever the league sponsor is, but if you want to wear your own jerseys or uniforms, you can, but there could be no visible logo by any other manufacturer. So we actually made a set with no logos on it other than Cowboys logos. And that night was basically Jerry saying, hey, with NFL, do what you want to do, but I'm going with this guy. I'm going with these guys. And it feels like within a couple of weeks, there were a few of us, we were on, similar to that very first basketball trip we talked about with basketball, we were on the NFL trip. And I can remember spending a week. We got the Cowboys, the Broncos, the Packers, the Raiders, I think Jacksonville, and then Carolina. And Jacksonville and Carolina were still pretty fresh. And we took that trip that week. In the beginning of the week, I remember Bill Hampton and Eric Petrusinelli were the two guys with properties. And they were polite and everything was cool at the beginning, but it was not like, hey guys, let's go. By the end of the week, though, I remember Billy, and pardon my French on this one, but he's like, this was the best week of travel with a company I've ever had. Because all we talked about was football all week. He's like, we go into a deal and you're like, hey, can we fix that? Or how do we make this better? Do athletes like the way that feels? Can we make that more comfortable? He goes, all we talked about all week was football. And he goes, last week, I was traveling with Reebok, and all they said was "fucking Nike. Who the fuck do they think they are? Why do they think they can get into this business? They took our team." So I think that was the first kind of shift in, you know what, we're not here to be the bullies that everybody kind of thinks we are. We actually really want to just figure out how to make the game better. And so I love Billy. Billy and I had a great relationship for a number of years. And then, it was shortly after that, once we'd signed, that Pat Bowlen, who, Pat and Jerry Jones were kind of the ringleaders on all this stuff. They were the two that got the first $1 billion deal with the NFL from a broadcasting standpoint. And he just came, he called, I think, Phil and probably Howard Slusher and said, "I want you guys to do the whole thing for me. I want you to do the logo and the uniforms and all of that. And I've told the NFL to stay out of it." Because up to that point, NFL Properties had done all of the branding for all of the teams. And that was literally the beginning. So same as all the other stories. Hey, you guys, you need to get your butts on a plane and go down to Denver and talk to the Broncos.
So backing up a little bit, one, I want to tell you a little funny anecdotal story from basketball, and it happened just a couple of months before that Cowboys sideline thing. And I went to one of those Chicago trips to, visit with someone, and a guy who many of us know, Greg Narad, was kind of the basketball PLM at the time. So he and I went to Chicago for Consumer MJ or something. And he says, "Hey, let's go to dinner. I got this guy I want you to meet. He's really cool. Everybody knows him in Chicago." So we go to dinner, have unbelievable conversation. This guy knows everybody, he tells us, "Here's where you go, here's what it is, here's what's happening with the Bulls." This guy's name is William Wesley. And I'm like, "Oh, this guy's cool. Yeah, yeah. They call him Worldwide. He's a nice guy." I'm telling you, it's probably 94, 90, 95, maybe 95 or 96. It's like, oh, he's connected. He was down in Florida, he knows guys. The night that they had Phil and Jerry on TV on Monday Night Football, which was this legendary moment where everybody says,
Yep.
"Hey, look at this. What's going on here?" The guy standing right next to him, who happened to be friends, who knows everybody, was William Wesley,
Of
who's,
course.
been incredibly
Yep.
successful as this executive with the Knicks.
Yeah.
Unbelievably good guy, knows people, remembers people, and he has this magic about him with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it just showed up that night. It was almost one of those, I can't believe what I'm seeing. I just met this guy, and here he is, here and there and everywhere.
Yep.
So that
Here's
was
to be
one thing.
here.
But also backing up, before we got into the Broncos, were we doing the whole NFL? Who were the teams we went out to see first? How did we sort
Yeah.
of approach it?
Yeah, those were the teams. So there was Reebok, I believe Reebok starter and maybe Logo had teams, and the league was split that way. And so rather
Yep.
than we would have taken the whole league if we could. But
Yep.
our way in was to have six of the 30. I believe the beginning was um, it was a trip to Dallas, and I remember the Oakland Raiders were like their offices were in a grade school. Just like how it was unreal. Actually, we had the Steelers as well. So we went and saw the Steelers. I've got some amazing stories from that was my childhood team. I didn't hit Green Bay, but it was a week long, so it was probably 3 or 4 of those key teams.
You were doing NFL design?
So what had happened? Yeah. So here's okay. Yeah. So at that point, we had done a lot of stuff with the basketball and Jordan and all that, and so I was art director at that point, and Todd Van Horn was just brought over to Team Sports. So I think he came in to be like creative director and run kind of the design group. And basically I went into Todd's office like right off the bat. I'm like, "Okay, dude, here's the deal. I've been in this group for 4 years already. I know what we've tried. I know it hasn't worked. I know where all the bodies are buried. I know all this stuff. I will do whatever it takes for you to be successful, but I want to work on team identities. Like I want my whole thing to focus on brand type stuff." Looked at me for a minute. He's like, "Deal." We shook on it. And so he's like, "Okay, work on it."
Nice.
And then like almost immediately after the Broncos thing came up. So he was like, "And here you go." That was the start. I know when we first signed the NFL teams, that's about when David Odesanya was hired. I remember going to a Raiders meeting and then a Raiders game when he came in. And so that team for NFL just started to form because we had to grow that a little bit up from the college piece once the NFL signed. So we moved on that pretty quickly. Yeah, and then that's when Pat came knocking.
Yep. So as he came knocking, did you have enough time, or was it kind of classic Nike, squeeze 2 years of work into the next 8 months?
We actually had time. I think it took us 15 to 18 months.
Yeah,
And so the first time we went down, we went on a little fact-finding trip. We come back, we do this stuff like we, make our little briefing book. Here's the story. Here's for the team. We all this stuff hand done, by the way, old school. Remember,
of course.
these were the 90s. The only direction Pat really gave us was he said, "I want a logo and a uniform that takes this league into the 21st century." And when we said, "Do you want it to be?" He's like, "No, I just want it to be badass." Okay, do you want to? He's like, "21st century. I just want it to feel like we have finally arrived in the future, and I want my team to lead him there." And so that was really his brief.
So concurrently, you had a team working on the NFL teams we had, the 6 or 8 teams, six,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then at the same time, you and a semblance of that team were working on this Broncos
Yep.
identity, but it was more than identity. It wasn't graphics. It was is that where the term system address came from?
Yeah. 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 And so yeah, exactly. So that was the one was we need a mark, and the second is we need a full uniform. And the cool part for me was that it was the first chance for us to have a true conversation from scratch with an owner and a coach about who they wanted their team to be, and then try to make not only a mark, but the uniforms fit too. Because
Yeah.
typically you come in and there's a team has, well, we're using this logo, or this is the uniform we've always had. You can tweak it a little bit,
Hmm.
but that was cool from that standpoint. And the folks we worked with, Pat was in every meeting, Pat Bowlen. Mike Shanahan was the head coach. He was in every meeting. Funny anecdote with that one, because I'm intimidated. Here's a head coach. We met in they were secret meetings. We met in the team hotel or the resort. They had meeting rooms there. We would go in there secretly. And of course, when you're in a hotel, they have the little dishes of candy. They had these dishes of Jolly Ranchers in the middle of the table. And I just
Yeah.
remember Coach Shanahan in every meeting eating Jolly Ranchers like they were popcorn. It was like, non-stop, just going, okay, guys, keep going. We had Michael Young, who was a former player. He had just recently retired and was working on staff, and then a few other execs. But it was 15 months of working almost every month, coming down there, presenting him some stuff.
Yeah. So you and I have always worked fairly close, but I didn't know much about this other than we were good enough friends that you'd say, "I got this Broncos project. It's going to
Yeah,
be cool." And you
yeah,
probably overshared that with me, but that's all you kind of said this because you were referencing again, I thought very impactful, but relatively smaller work that we did just previously. I think maybe the year prior with Georgetown.
yeah,
Um, how about from a Denver standpoint in the team? You said secret meetings. So
yeah.
the owner knew, the coach knew, and a couple other people knew, but nobody else knew, like, we're about to get
Nobody else.
anything.
Nobody else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there was a lot of sensitivity because there was a lot of rumors that Pat wanted to move the team, which he never did. Not once did we talk to him, did he talk about moving the team. He actually talked a lot about, the only real direction we got was 21st century badass. And, our fan base is the Central Plains. Like, we're not just Denver, we're not just Colorado, we are all of these plain states. And
Yeah.
so that is our reference point. And that made it important that this didn't leak out because it could really go sideways. In fact, even his ownership of the team. It also made it interesting because that first meeting, I remember the first meeting when we came to pitch and present, and even without talking about the logos for a minute, the first presentation was in their team room. So it's a kind of waterfall theater seating, like where the coach would be down front. And we had our stuff set up down on the front, and he came in from the back. I remember Pat coming in from the back, and he walked about halfway down and kind of to the middle, and he's like, "Okay, so what do you got?" But you remember our meeting with Paul Allen for
Of
the
course.
Blazers, and the owners are
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I'm a billionaire. What you
Yeah.
got? What you like?
Yeah.
You guys, where's
Exactly.
the stuff? Where's the designs?" And I was like, "Mr. Bowlen, great to have you here. We got some stuff to share with you, but first we got a little video to show. We take a moment. We want to put something on screen, and then we'll talk about it right after that." And so he sat down, very begrudgingly kind of sat down. And because we didn't have much direction from him on style and that kind of stuff, we knew we had to do a lot of that work on our own. And so one of the things that we've done is tons of research on what's Western but not Old West, but what is the history of the Wild West, and what are things that could become hallmarks. It's all the storytelling that we've done together forever, right? It's what Tinker taught us how to do. And I found this legend of a ghost horse of the plains, which was a story about a white stallion that when the West was rounding up all of the Broncos and taming them, they couldn't catch the stallion. This guy evaded everything. Finally, they caught him. And when they tried to break him, they staked him without food, without water, whatever. Basically, he's like, hey, look, if I can't be free, I don't want to live. And so we took, and that was a true legend that we found. We put that to a really, Keith, it's hilarious. We'll put this up on our Substack page. But the video of, I went to like Blockbuster, and we got VHS
I
video.
thought it was the greatest. I saw. Are you talking to YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube. Where the streets.
Yeah.
So we put it to YouTube.
Yep.
We just we had like nature videos of horses, stallions,
the
like
clips of the horses. Yeah,
stuff. We just put the words on the top, and we played that, and it was.
But that struck a chord, Ken.
It's 90s, and then lights come up. One of the best things ever. Lights come up, and he's pushed back from his seat, and his glasses are off, and he's actually going like this, and he goes, "Every Bronco fan needs to see that video." And we're like, okay, all right, we're off. Here we go.
Yeah.
Now we're going. So that was good. That was definitely a moment.
So that's a lot of the background, and what it took, kind of the inner workings. Take me a little bit from a kind of design standpoint. Somebody on the outside can see the results of the design.
Yeah.
They can see new colors, they can see new patterns. But in the process, there are things like, changing a really dedicated community to change a color palette just a little bit, which is pretty extraordinary, certainly in those days. Now it's probably not much. Everyone's got like 19 colors.
Yeah.
The look of the uniform, the innovation, the whole imagery, etc.
Yeah.
How'd that design process go, and kind of who played some key roles? How do we fuse it with Nike innovation, etc.? Tell me a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. And there's really the brand thing, and then the product thing. And this might even be one of the best examples of how the two came together, if anything I've ever been fortunate to work on. But the first was establishing just what is it we're looking at. And like you said, that video, the significance of it is there's a wildness, there's an untamed nature to it. We knew it needed to be, if you look at what the Broncos logo was in the beginning, small little, they called him the pony, right? Little. We knew that it needed to have a ferocity and an energy to it. Like, so this is where they were. The orange was the biggest thing. And we also, in talking to Michael Young and some others just about the orange, is like one of his first things was, he's like, I never felt badass putting on that orange jersey. Like, I never felt really tough, but it's always been the Broncos. And so we knew we had a design problem to solve, as in, how do we make this orange still equally significant, but do something that would make this team and these uniforms appear that they are more modern, and that we're talking about the future as opposed to very much the past. Toughen them up, for one thing, is what Pat had talked about. Another analogy we used was a volcano. Like, when we talk about what is the significance of orange, we talked about the spirit of that horse, and the fire lives inside, right? The fire was inside that horse, such that he would not be tamed. And so when you do that, you start talking about volcanoes, and the outside of a volcano is dark, but the inside has the fire, the lava burning in it until it breaks out, right? So we started asking questions like, if the fire is actually inside the horse, could we flip the colors and have it be that you see, if the eye is the window to the soul, you see the fire through the eye, you see it, maybe we use flames for a mane and things like that. And that's kind of the stuff we really started exploring. And so even from a sketch standpoint, you could see where, and the first meeting, I will say this too, is the first time we went down, we had 3 options. And we just started with logo. We didn't really try to solve everything at once. We knew we needed to get him into a space with the logo to have a sense of design. And the stuff on the left, you can see where we're just looking at shapes of heads, and is it a D, or is it the back of a horse's neck, or a head? Let me put it this way: we had at one point, and I shoot myself for not having this, I had a 3-inch thick binder of sketches that were this many sketches per page on that many pages, explorations we did. When we went down there the first time, we had one that was kind of close to what they had. Then we had one that, like these ones on the left, or on the right of the screen here, you can see David Odesanya was a key player in that, and he made one that felt more refined but still very kind of contained. And we had another one that was still conservative. And I will say, I remember it was a couple nights before we were going down there, and they just didn't feel like they lived up to what we said about like really going for it, unleashing this horse and this style. And so we threw one in a little bit like the one to the left of the color one there. It was flames and a horse was dead. And going, we know this isn't designed right, but we need to get him to lean one way or another. And that's what we presented after that video ran. We had those 3 variations that we talked through. We flipped them around. And when he went, it's that one, he pointed to the flames. He's like, I don't like it exactly how it is, but I want something like that more than these other 2. Yeah. We knew we were going to push it into something that had more attitude, more energy, and that stylistically, we started to study. And so you can see a lot of that then comes down to just iterations of shapes of horses' heads and where how do nostrils look and that kind of stuff. I will say, in a lot of the sketches, and jumping ahead a bit, we did this. There's something here, and I do not have more sketches of this. I wish I did. This was a secondary mark that was definitely a non-conventional pose for a horse. When we were looking we looked at a lot of research of, like, we kind of did. I always loved Disney growing up and how they brought artists, like they're doing Bambi, they bring deer in and they do all that stuff. We didn't bring horses in, but we looked at enough stuff that when you see a horse that is actually pissed off, in the Wild West movies, the horse always goes up and the guy's on his back. But if you're actually looking at how horses respond, like if a snake comes under them, or if there's another one or they're in a fight or whatever, their body, they are so athletic in how they move.
Yeah, they can contort a bit.
Yep. And so there was a buddy that I went to Art Center with, that we had done a project in school. I hired him to give me some thoughts on some secondary marks that are kind of full body. And he started messing around with it. And when he came with this guy, we knew we wanted the flames, the hair to be flames and the tail. But if you look at the top part of that, there's a ton of what the final logo became in that work and just in that strength when you can kind of crop it. And so that just became a matter of how we started to refine and simplify. You can see what I was saying about it is a white horse, but that fire in his eye and then the mane kind of provide that energy. Yep. And that really led to the mark that then those shapes and that language began to express itself through all the rest of the products. So.
And wasn't it great the way it tied into the innovation that we're building into the uniform, the lines?
Totally. So the other piece is David Turner. I'd give David credit for changing the aesthetics and the function of football more than anybody else on the planet. It started with the uniforms. This was what he had called the Batwing jersey. So what's interesting is he didn't design the functionality for what we're doing, and we didn't design this to fit with this. But what he did create was, on this jersey, he created this inset panel here that you can see comes right up to the neck, comes up to this point. And so we looked at that, and then we looked at the flames in the mane, are going, this like these really look like they fit. Functionally, the first big innovation that we did in football, I know he'd done some minor versions for college football, but this is the first one where literally players would put it on and go, oh my God, for the first time I can put my hands up over my shoulders and move. Right. And it was such a significant innovation. And then that led to the decision. If you look at this version, this is an early prototype, just has the regular collar. But David was thinking about things like, instead of having heavy ribbed collars, which are abrasive, why wouldn't we have a soft lycra collar? That was one thing. But if we're going to have this shape going here, why wouldn't we? And this is where I say we take some things from what you and I did in basketball. How about if we also think about how we can taper the deal so those same points become very real? and then that logo has a place to sit, right? We're given a nesting spot to the same way we've done, honestly, the college basketball stuff. And so it also gave a reason for the NFL logo to have a really safe place, a great place to sit, as opposed to just tacking it onto a deal.
And functionally, those of us, if you
Yep.
spend enough time in apparel, you have those moments where it also structurally holds everything together so you don't
Yep.
get the gapping or any of those things. So,
Yep.
yeah, it works across the board.
Completely. Yep. Then the branding with numbers, fonts. We had like whole new custom typefaces, all of that stuff, and it extended in. Oh, in fact, when we were talking about logos, this is probably closer. This wasn't the first round prototype, but this is one of the ones we had showed at one stage,
Yeah.
as far as applied to a helmet. Because that was the next thing: is how do you put a logo into context so you know how it would work, right? Like, what does it look like from the back? Kind of how does it look like from the front? And this is where we actually thought here, what if we went navy and white on everything else and we just put the orange on the helmet instead? It wasn't so much in the cards, but then when we came back to the helmet, now you can reference the uniform, we can reference the logo and everything. Like, this is a metallic car paint, which is the first time at least Nike has done metallic car paint. I'm not sure. Carolina Panthers may have already done it, but for sure this was one of the first. But the other thing that we did that was, I thought was cool about how we looked at solving this design is, typically when you're looking at uniforms, a lot of people design them for one player. Like, I'll design it. Oh, here's what the uniform looks like. Here's the jersey. Here's the short. And with the Broncos, also just because the name Broncos, you think about a herd of Broncos. We asked a lot of questions about what does the team look like together when they're standing. You have the line. So it's one thing we're in the huddle, but then we go to the line, and then when we all get into stance, that's where the stripe came from too. That's where we're like, if you look at the
Right.
stripe on the main, you look at the finish on the collar and the other piece. What if we finish the helmet as a stripe in a way that you think about, like we were thinking a lot about players on the other side of the line, as the team comes down and takes their stance, you have this row of spikes looking at you,
Right.
and how badass that could look too. So all of those
Yeah.
things, yeah, kind of came together
So,
in a pretty good way.
so one, I just want you to go back and refresh my memory on something
Yep.
because at least personally it was substantial to me. And then I want you to tell me a little bit about kind of the rollout and then the results. But can you go back to the slide, the older logo with the
Yep.
D? And I know that was on their helmet.
Yep.
I don't see it in this image, but I recall their blue being used significantly less and being a significantly lighter blue.
Yeah.
It looks darker here in this image, but I just remember the blue
Yeah.
and the combination of blue and orange being so much softer, if you will.
Yeah.
Was that the case? And
Yep.
did that take convincing, or was that kind of all in the video and the strength and all of that, and it was an easy sell?
Yeah. It didn't take that much convincing. Pat was nervous. He was committed. I will say the dude had vision, and he had like, he believed in what he believed in. He was pretty fearless. It was a lighter blue that they had moved kind of to this reflex blue here. But that helmet, yeah, the original helmet was really kind of a softer, much softer blue.
Yeah.
And they were orange jerseys, white pants. So you're
Yes.
right. You're totally right. Blue in the stripes, blue in the stripe on the
Yeah.
sleeve, a little
So
bit of
less
blue
use
on
of
the
blue, and it
heel.
was it
That's
wasn't
it.
much darker than almost like a UCLA between UCLA and
Yep.
Kansas City Royals to me.
Yep. Yep. And so, even, I know the first time Elway saw it, he was like, "It's a lot of blue." um, and so, I think what happened, to your point, and it was clear that the fans would probably have some issues with it. We believed that we were doing right by the team by talking about the color that they all cared about the most as the passion and the love and the energy and the ferocity that they held. And it didn't have to be, you wear it on the outside. You don't have to wear your heart on your sleeve necessarily.
Not 100%. Yep. So talk to me about the internal rollout and then kind of the external and media, and what were the highlights along that? Because the Ke- the Ken Black I know, because kind of we professionally grew up working together, was this Salem, right? You grew up in Salem
Yeah,
area,
yeah,
Eugene area, Salem, right?
Salem, Salem, yeah,
Small town,
yeah,
Salem, like sort of quiet, but not really when you get to know him, but
Yeah.
kind of powerhouse of a designer.
Yeah.
And you kind of, in some respects became the Ken Black we know today, who's like, yeah, I'm changing the world through design.
Oh, that's awesome.
So tell me about that both the internal and
Yeah.
the external, like what you went through, big
Yeah.
stages, etc.
That's a great question. I appreciate your comment on that too. As much as there was go figure this out and get it done, there was also a you got to figure it out. I remember when we were presenting to Pat, that first meeting to Pat, I'm like, I think we need like big, like we need a video, we need big boards. Like we can't just show this guy design. And Todd and the team sports, probably Bruce, the leadership was like, well, we don't budget for stuff like that. So I went to Gordon Thompson, who was head of design at the time,
Ah,
and I said, hey
brilliant.
dude, hey, I think we're about to meet an owner, and like this is our big shot. I think we need. So he gave me like $5,000 for a video and $2,000 to get some boards printed. I think that's the stuff that helped me know how to make stuff happen, as much as the process of going through it and leading designers, right? And then navigating the gauntlet. We had gotten good. You and I had both learned how to navigate Nike's gauntlet of everything needs a review. Everybody kind of needs to sign in. People need to know that they're heard. Leaders need to know what's going on.
And to feel like they share in it.
Yep.
Like you
And
got to give them room to say,
yep.
hey, did you think about this? And then
Yep.
that one little comment, just by listening, they're now bought in because they
Yep.
saw it first and they're
Yep.
not. Yeah.
And the next time you tell the story with them in the room, you use some of their words as part of the story, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so that was really the internal piece. Once Pat signed off on it, it was a lot of socializing. Todd and I basically kind of made the rounds and shared it with Gordon and design teams and others. And then the PR press conference came, which was interesting. So because Pat had said, look, I want Nike to do this, not the NFL. And I have a hunch too, also because we didn't have a lot of orange in that thing. I think there were even leaders at Nike that were really nervous about it. And so we went out for the press conference on that day, and it was myself. We went out the day before. Myself, Todd Van Horn, Elliot Hill, Tom Creighton, I believe, and then Vashir Mooney was the one who was handling the PR. Remember Vashir?
Of course.
And we had been told, go and support them, but Nike needs to leave no fingerprints here. What we don't want this to become is a Nike story. Do not speak, do not whatever. Support them, but stay out of the spotlight. And so the first thing came in that night. We went in for some meetings, and Pat goes, hey, I've got this young reporter that we want to kind of, he's trusted. He's an insider. We can trust him. I want you to talk to him about what we did for the logo. I look at Todd and Elliot, and they're like, well, okay. So it was Adam Schefter. So I don't know if you follow NFL stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Adam
Of
Schefter
course.
was like a young beat reporter for
He's
in
big time
Denver.
now.
And so we sat together for about 45 minutes and talked about stuff, but didn't show it. And I'm like, okay, good. That went okay. That's done. Tomorrow morning we have the press conference, and I think it was like 10 o'clock or something. And we're at the pre-meeting that morning and going through what he's going to talk about. And Pat was going to roll it out. We have him set up to roll the whole thing out. And at one point he just got frustrated, and he goes, I'm not fucking doing this. He goes, I own the team. He goes, I'm not going to talk about the uniforms. He looks down the table. He goes, Ken, you did this stuff. You're going to do it. And same. I look at Elliot, and he goes, I look at Todd, who's my boss, and he just puts his head down. Vashir kind of gives me the, hey, I got you, man. And I'm like, okay, so I guess in like an hour I'm on. So we had the press conference there. It was my first time in front of media. You talk to individual media, but never a bank. This is like, there must have been 40 cameras, eye level. So we have the stage, we have all our stuff set up. We're going to run the video, cameras eye level. And it's like, okay, get up and tell the story. And we went through it just like we did it once he's like, hey, Ken Black's here. David Wasp, president of the Broncos, introduced me, and then hopped up. And you have John Elway in a uniform, and Hasselbeck, and there was another defensive player there. And it's kind of like how we would do sales meetings at Nike a little bit.
Right.
But I think it was a little too much like a sales meeting, because when I came down, so we got through it, and I came down, and Elliot hit me and he's like, "Hey, dude, nice job." He goes, "But the next time you're on stage with a Hall of Famer, don't treat him like a fit model." He goes, "Acknowledge, be like, hey, here I am with a future
Oh,
Hall of Famer. Why don't you
Elway just stand up
basically
there quietly, like, "Hey, there's some guy over here. He's a little
you'll
pigeon-toed, but he's athletic enough, I guess, to wear the uniform."
dude, you see the if you see the video, you can see the video, you can see the photos, and literally John basically comes up, he's standing next to me. I'm like, so here's the deal. Here's what we did. I take him by the shoulders, I turn him around, I go, here's the
That's
numbers on the
good.
back, So
That's good.
look, and I'm just trying to make it
So he
through.
didn't say
I'm just trying
anything.
to make it through. No, he was
You
like, he
That's
had a
good.
company, I was just blinded by the lights, trying to get through. And then next day we got Woody Page. So Woody Page of ESPN fame wrote this
Yeah.
story. Swoosh, Nike sneaks in and takes charge and accused us of
Yeah, tell me about the
sneaking
swoosh
a
in the
swoosh.
nostril.
So he accused us of sneaking a swoosh into the nostril, which I'll pop this back up here again. So he claims that nostril is a swoosh.
Yeah, I know. I've
And the
seen it.
whole thing
That's
was,
good.
and what he said was he called me a granola eating Yahoo from Beaverton, Oregon. Like what the hell do they know? He's the guy got up here and he talked about the ghost horse of the plains and all this bullshit, and then he gave us Navy uniforms. What the hell is that? And so that became actually kind of a running joke, but also a sore spot. For one thing, as we're leaving before we got that, obviously that came out the next day. Like we're leaving the press conference to drive to the airport in a black Suburban, and the freeway is packed, and we are listening to sports talk radio, and they are tearing us to shreds. we're like, we need to get out of town. And if they knew, if that guy, I guarantee you that guy right there is listening to this, and if they knew we were here, might not be good. I think a week later we were in New York and presenting this because with Pat, we were presenting this to the NFL. It was the first time we gave them kind of the formal, here's all of the stuff that we did.
Yeah.
And because of the swoosh thing, Sarah Levinson, who was the president of NFL Properties at the time, I had heard was actually pissed about it, like questioning it. And so you always start a presentation with a story, right? So I step up and I'm like, so Sarah, one, this has been great to work on. Thank you for giving us the space to do it. It's been awesome working with Pat. And there were a lot of things that were really hard about this project, but the thing that was the hardest of them all was figuring out where we could put a swoosh in the Broncos logo. She didn't even blink. Not a half smile, not a
Nothing.
And because she
Wow.
didn't laugh, nobody else in the room. So I'm like, of course so now I do the backpedal. There's no way you think Nike Legal would let us do. There's no way Nike Legal. There's not a possible
Right.
chance we would be able to do that. It doesn't even look like a swoosh, right? So, yeah. So once we finished that kind of was a close on the project.
Aftermath. Broncos were kind of successful. That might have helped. To say a little bit about that.
2 Super Bowls. They won the next 2 Super Bowls.
The
So they
next
won
two.
the
Yeah.
next 2. So they won them in the home and they won them in the away. And that was really the even with all of when you start looking at the magazines, and I love this cover of SI. This cover of SI because it kind of felt like the payback for our story.
Nice.
Just its whole
Yeah.
sweet redemption. So they're talking about John finally coming back, close to the end of his career and finally breaking through and winning. But I also took this kind of as hey, we were run out of town for that uniform that he's wearing right now that he held up
Right.
the Lombardi trophy with. So that always felt kind of sweet, extra sweet.
Exactly. So a couple of years later, were there ever any, articles or coverage, on the inside, everyone would be like, oh, the Broncos look so much better now. And of course,
Yeah.
everybody looks better winning.
Yeah.
But just in general, have you gotten commentary over the years of the greatness that was all the right things coming together, the innovation, the time, the design, the winning, the partnership, the vision of Bowlen, etc.?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know that people got the picture of Pat Bowlen, which I would hope I would have loved for them to have more of it. Broncos were, their logo, the uniform were consistently top. And when anybody does a survey on best logos in league or uniforms, the Broncos were there. obviously 30 years ago. So it's all accelerated into the stratosphere. But I think that was folks really began to understand more of the significance of what we did. I think the tragedy, a little bit, was it was only a few years later that Nike was out of the league again because they went through the dry
Right.
spell where Reebok took it over for a number of years until Nike came back.
What's your thoughts on the current state of NFL uniforms, logos, et cetera? Do you feel like, people talk about Nike, et cetera, and I feel
Yeah,
like the work that you guys did, I wasn't part of football, obviously. I'll say we because I was with the
yeah,
company, but that we did back in those days was kind of the precursor. We did stuff like, telling Coach K Duke should try a black jersey, and the notion of
yeah,
a third jersey was crazy. We
yeah,
went to the Lakers with the original white.
yeah,
All of those when we had 10 teams just in that first NBA stint. And then
yeah,
likewise with the NFL, things like the Broncos and so on. And now there's these
yeah,
so many different special games.
yeah,
And from my perspective, the audience is split, and it depends on if
yeah,
you're talking to an old crotchety fan or somebody
yeah,
new. But what's
yeah,
your perspective on where
yeah,
it is? Do you feel like that's an offshoot of where we started it and of
yeah.
Nike, or do you feel like it's heading in the wrong direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we launched something into a really interesting, really cool trajectory, and I think scale and success has kind of claimed the momentum more than design. I think there's some beautiful examples out there in the NFL and even the NBA, but I also think, when we talked to Coach K about a black uniform, we knew what we were saying. There was significance to that conversation. It wasn't like, hey, if we get him into black, then we're going to move him into purple, and then we'll get him on a all plaid, and then we'll get him on. It wasn't
Yeah,
like we're trying to move him. We were like, we want to make really good decisions for you that move you, but also stay true.
yeah,
And I feel for designers now because I feel like there's such a turn that trying to create something, another version or another variation that is still really authentic and true to what that team is supposed to be about when you've actually built most of it into this one. Like, how do I do a variation and then a variation? At some point, you just get to the point where we're just picking stuff. Um,
yeah,
I also think it has taken some of the part of the passion of fans is, as Tinker has always said, if somebody doesn't love it and somebody doesn't hate it, you probably haven't done all that much. And I think there can be a suffering from a fan's perspective of kind of being fatigued. And I can't really fall in love with this thing and put it on and have it embody something, as
yeah,
opposed to, well, I'm buying it because it's a new city version, so I guess I got to get it.
yeah.
I'm not saying it's a bad place. I still think we could be more thoughtful. I think
Agree.
there are some things I see with design that I'm like, they're rushing it. And I don't know how to explain it exactly, Keith, too. Let me go back to our basketball versions. When we talked in the previous episode about shooting shirts and how we were looking for something that wasn't a tank top that could be culturally part of what kids wear. That's one thing. When Nike got out of the NBA for a while and Adidas got in there and they made the tight-fitting short sleeve deal, it's not the answer, right? But it's trying to answer the same question. But design-wise and from a commercial standpoint, didn't really take into consideration what was really happening there, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. My very quick 2 cents is I feel
Yeah,
like a little bit of the professional uniforms of license. It's kind of jumped the shark.
yeah, yeah.
It's a
Uh-huh.
little bit chasing ghosts. They're chasing a licensed business and a consumer that literally doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
knowing kind of from the inside the resources and energy it takes to design a fourth uniform or a fifth or a city edition or a celebrate, Hispanic heritage or Black heritage or breast cancer awareness is all well and good, but I feel like the resources and energy doesn't turn into anything commercial. And it's like that old, do you remember years ago? There was a guy, I think his name was Chris Cook, and he wrote this book called The Paradox of Choice.
Hmm.
And the story he told, I'll give one example, but it really resonated with me. And the story that he told was that I think it's Crest. I'm making it up. Crest used to have one toothpaste and had 60% of the market. And they kept line extending and line extending and line extending. And now they have 14 different choices and half the market share. And so his general point was the more you give people, the more you devalue the stuff that's really
There you
important at
go.
the center.
Yep.
And so, being a sports fan and going to Dodger games or watching Dodgers in the World Series, it's the white home uniform. That's what it means. And the more you start having them wear the blue one and the black one and this one, you're actually distracting from that while actually not creating any real consumer energy and commerce. And I feel like the entire professional sports business is so caught up in that they're putting all this time and energy not gaining anything from a revenue standpoint, but also not making fans feel better or more meaningfully about that team. So,
Yep. Totally.
anyways, I know that's a tangent,
Totally.
but I mean, as
Yeah.
a sports fan and where I've seen it go, I do think Nike kicked a lot of that off with
Yeah.
third jersey and special moments and you and I and shooting shirts in 1994 and so on. I think that
Yeah.
started that trend, but that trend was at a time where people were wearing all that stuff on the street.
Yeah.
Now it's a fan in the moment in the arena. And I think they're chasing a ghost of an old licensed business that doesn't
Yep.
really exist the same way
Yep.
it used to.
It's
It's still
interesting.
fun to watch.
Yeah, I love it. I love it too. And my question will be, it'll be fun to go 10 years forward and ask that of the kids who are growing up now who have 4 city jerseys or 3 variants of whatever their NFL team is,
Yeah.
and what stuck with them and how much they loved it. Somebody I was talking to earlier this week on the subject of basketball stuff was talking about the jerseys, the uniforms, the shorts, all the stuff we lived and created, and they were talking to a younger kid and said, what is your favorite era of basketball as it relates to product? And the kid said the Elite Sock.
Good one.
Which is a very
But that was,
specific, like, imagine, how
yes.
big that was, but that is a window, which is like, oh my God, everybody has to have it in every color, so they move through. So I would be very interested in seeing what that next generation
Wow.
thinks of the
That's
now.
really good.
Right?
You
Yeah.
remember our friend Doug Reed, who was
Uh-huh.
on the product side of football back in the days. I
Yep.
remember he coined the phrase in one of his sales meeting presentation that consumer gets full closet syndrome after a while.
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
just you go in and you're like, I don't need any more of that. I'm going to move to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Without a doubt. Yeah. So,
So, hey, back on the Broncos. It ended amazing. They won a couple of Super Bowls. You moved on, and what was and you were working on Olympics. What was the first Olympics you worked on?
Sydney 2000. So that following
Yeah,
that, Gordon Thompson asked me to be the creative director for the Olympics. First
I
time we'd
remember
done
that.
that. Nobody wanted a
And I
creative director for the
know
Olympics.
that's a whole show on some of the
Yeah.
stuff you did
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But you were in the middle of working on that, and there's a famous story, and
Ah,
I'd love for you to tell it.
yeah.
Running into the Denver
Yeah.
Bronco crew as they came out to campus after the Super Bowl. So
Yeah.
this is the moment I've been waiting
Okay.
for. Please tell that story so
Yeah.
I stop butchering it as I tell my friends.
I know you love this one. Okay. So yes, working on the Olympics, there are 2 of us, myself and Martha Ivester, the 2 running the Olympics. It was February, shortly after this, so 97, probably 98-ish, somewhere in there. So the way that works is, you set up what the plan is with all the geographies come to town. So everybody from all around the world comes to town. You lay out, here's the plan, and then you ask them, what's your version of that plan? So we laid it out in the morning. We broke for lunch, and everybody went back to do their deal. And they were all coming back to the Joan Benoit Samuelson Center, which is right sits out by Nike's Lake, to present their versions. So I'm walking back from lunch. I'm going in early. I'm dressed nice. I'm in a sweater. Like, I'm dressed actually nicer than Nike. Probably sweater, probably some slacks, some dress shoes. As I'm walking along towards Joan Benoit, I see there's a group walking along on the building over there, and I'm like, oh, hey, that's Coach Shanahan. But he's got like 8 people with him. And then as he passes, I then see Bashir Mooney, who is the PR person with the Broncos, and she just announced she was retiring. So I was going to go, Bashir, you're retiring, right? But she walked behind a tree. Like, as I see her, she walks behind a tree. So I'm still walking. What I don't realize is that while I'm watching all of them, I've veered off course. Where the lake is and the sidewalk, there's a space right like this, the sidewalk. I put my foot right in the gap. I went in the fucking lake. So, and it's one of those where everything, it truly is slow motion. It's complete slow motion where in my mind, I go, okay, I could fight this and maybe rescue, but I probably will also hurt myself. And in the back of my head, I'm hearing people going, oh, hey, wow. So I'm like, fuck it, I'm just in. I just go in. Now, I didn't get my hair wet, but I'm in the water up to my chest. And this is February in Oregon. And I turn around and Jerry Erasmi, and Henry Molina, who's in our PR group, and one other person are standing on the edge with their eyes like just looking at me. So I get up, I get out of the pool like I'm getting out of the water, like I'm getting out of a swimming pool, hop up, stand in front of them and go, well, how about that? And Jerry is doing anybody who's seen Tommy Boy knows this moment when the deer's in the car and it takes out David Spade's car, and Tommy's like,
Yes.
that was awesome. Sorry about your car, man. Sorry. So I am, soaked, like literally a puddle, and they're just like going, what the hell?
I want to restate context because I know this exact space. For anybody who doesn't, Joan Benoit Samuelson, they're over at Prefontaine Hall, about 50 yards away. Because I think the part that I want to be sure is the audience was Shanahan, Pat.
Mike was there. Pat wasn't there, thank goodness. But yeah.
Oh, he wasn't. It was Shanahan. Okay. So the audience was all of them, Fisher, but a pretty good sized Nike crew in the middle of a weekday at Nike. So your workday was done.
At lunch. Yeah. So I walked into the meeting space and just
Legendary Ken.
said, look, I got to go. People, they're looking at me like, why are you so wet? Henry Molina's like, hey, come to the PR closet. I've got some dry clothes for you. And we had to walk to Dan Fouch, which is 2 buildings away. And every step, my shoes are squeaking. I'm leaving puddle, like bubbles and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's silent. And I go, so news of this is going to spread pretty quick around campus, isn't it? And Henry goes, like wildfire. He's a little Latin voice.
Jerry
like,
Erasmi tells that story.
Yeah.
Jerry tells that story very well.
Yeah, every time I see Jerry, he shakes his head and like kind of chuckles. He's like, "Yep." I'm like, "Yep, you were there."
The legend of Ken Black.
Word has it that Coach Shanahan went back and told Pat, and I will say I'll close that out by saying I did my service to humanity by going into the lake like that, because I left to do Spark, and when we were acquired, I came back and was in a meeting with a bunch of people I didn't know. We went around the table for introductions. And when I said, my name's Ken Black, a woman across the table, right across the table there, gasps and says, oh my God, you're Ken Black? She's like, I fell into the lake last year and I thought I was the only one. And everybody told me you already did it a long time ago. So thank you.
Oh, wow.
So I'll take it.
So good.
From the heights to the depths. Yeah.
Yep.
You know,
not only is the story amazing, but just in a nice, humble, subtle, but kind of powerful way, leading that team and making it happen to change the Broncos. And I think it inspired a lot of other teams. And again, the organization was behind you. You had a great team. David Turner, David Odesanya. I think Nate Retzlaff also worked on it.
Nate
I'm not sure if I missed anybody.
Rodney Richardson, Kevin Lyons.
Yep. That's right. So really good team, but kind of the output is kind of part of, for me, the lore of the great stuff that we did in the 90s. So love the leadership. And I actually think the capping off of kind of a couple of years later, a year and a half later, waving to say hello to him and going in
the drink
is great, because it's you're the exact opposite of the person that people would root for falling in the lake. There's a bunch of people who, take credit for the big salad, who people would go, I wish they would just fall in. But it happens to the best of us.
Good news is you can go in, and if you have a sense of humor, you can survive it. So there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
You're a lot bigger than that moment.
Well, thanks for taking a walk down the road on this story.
No, thank you. Appreciate you allowing me to be part of it.
Good. Okay, well, we'll connect again soon. Thanks, Keith, for taking the lead on that episode. I appreciate your curiosity and interest in the whole Broncos project. I have a hunch you might have been more interested in getting to that falling in the lake story than the Broncos stuff. But regardless, it was fun to walk through it with you. And the conversation actually made me think about the value and the importance of these, not the things we do. I always thought in my career early on, it was about the logo or the product or the item you've created. I thought that was what the end goal was. And this is a great project that just reminded me that it's more about actually the connections that we make. The moments and the artifacts are just pieces that can remind us later about some of the magic that we experienced with really interesting, really talented people. The one thing we didn't show in the conversation today is this was the style guide that we created for the Broncos. We created 20 of these that has everything to do with the logo, the new identity, all of the bits and pieces that we designed. And everything in that book represents hands and minds and hearts that touched it. And that is the beauty of something like, there's only 20 of these in existence. And so the connection to the folks who made it, and the fact that it still lives 30 years later is pretty fantastic. And that was the lesson for me. I will say, I'll recommend to each one of you, whatever you're doing in your life, whoever you're doing it with, if it's something that's interesting with people that are inspiring you and it's work that you feel like is important, take pictures, send messages, do things that capture the moment in a way that you can look back on later and have a great story or a great memory or something to share, and that gives you a reason and a way to reach out and touch those folks that you actually had some good moments with, you may have lost touch with. And those sentiments and that energy lives on. I will say, and I'll leave you with this today, one of the coolest pieces of this was receiving this letter from Pat Bowlen after the project. He said, "Dear Ken, enclosed is a letter I sent to Howard, Slusher, and Phil Knight that is self-explanatory. All of us here at the Broncos cannot express enough appreciation for the great job you and your design group did on the logo and uniforms. We're all very proud of the results, and especially proud of the fact that we did it with Nike. You are the greatest. Yours truly, Pat Bowlen." With a great job at the bottom, like the A+ from your grade school teacher. Fantastic memory, fantastic moments, and the artifacts that hold those stories make it even more special. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate your interest in this stuff. If you want to see more about the Broncos elements, the details, we'll have the Ghost Horse video, more video from the press conference, many other things that are connected behind the scenes on our Substack page. We'll put those videos on our YouTube page. And please hit us with a like if you enjoyed this. And we are so grateful that you followed us. Send us messages, questions, or thoughts. We promise to include them in future episodes.